The rain hammered the metal roof of Hangar 7 like 1,000 tiny fists. 2:14 a.m., Elena Voss strode in, crisp navy Brioni suit untouched by the downpour, Louboutin heels clicking wet echoes across the concrete. She stopped 6 feet from the prototype turbine that had just kept her star pilot alive, eyes narrowing on the janitor, wiping oil from his hands with a faded rag. "You're a glorified mop. This isn't your sandbox. Box your things and disappear by morning." Marcus Hale kept wiping. The night shift crew stood frozen behind her, the same men and women he had quietly taught to read pressure curves between mops and breaks. No one spoke. The rain kept falling, because 6 months from that exact moment, Elena Voss's name would be quietly removed from every company masthead, while Marcus Hale's appeared on every patent and every podium. The debt would be collected so methodically she would never see the blade until it rested against her throat in front of the same board that once laughed at him. What exactly was hiding inside those dog-eared blueprints no one had touched in 11 years? Marcus, 34, single father to 7-year-old Sophie, lived in a cramped third-floor walk-up on the corner of 9th and Alder. The apartment smelled of burnt coffee and a lavender soap Sophie insisted on. Every morning he dropped her at school, kissed the top of her head, then pushed a gray maintenance cart through the corridors of Voss Dynamics, the $2.4 billion hypersonic engine manufacturer that dominated the Pacific Northwest skyline. 6 years earlier, he had been the original lead designer. Then came the car accident that took his wife. Then the bottle. Then the disappearance. He resurfaced only as the man who emptied trash and fixed what others broke, always in the quiet hours before dawn. The dismissal stung worst because it happened in front of the night shift crew he had mentored for years without them ever knowing his real name. They called him Hale the Janitor. He never corrected them. Day one, the hangar lights buzzed overhead as Elena's taillights disappeared into the rain. Marcus stood alone at 3:07 a.m. in Hangar 4. The fixed turbines still ticked with residual heat. He set his mop against the wall, reached into the pocket of his faded coveralls, and closed his fingers around the worn stainless steel dog tag on its chain. The metal was warm from his body. He had carried it since the day his wife's name was etched on the other side. He pulled the cowling open. Inside, the entire PhD engineering staff had missed it. A misrouted fuel atomizer array, 1 degree off, enough to turn a Mach 7 run into a fireball. Marcus didn't hesitate. From memory, he swapped 3 microvalves, each worth $1,800. His hands moved like they had never stopped designing. The cold start cycle purred to life at 99.4% efficiency, a sound smoother than any test run in the last 11 months. He left a single yellow sticky note on the console. Seat 18C. Torque specs, 447 foot-pounds. Nothing more. Then he slipped out the side gate into the rain, dog tag clicking once against his ribs as he walked. Day 2. Security cameras caught nothing. Elena Voss received the night report at 7:42 a.m. She read the efficiency numbers twice, frowned at the sticky note, and ordered the note destroyed. The crew whispered. The turbine had been on the edge of catastrophic failure. Someone had saved them again. Marcus pushed his cart down Corridor B-17 at 9 a.m. Sophie's latest crayon drawing of a rocket ship folded in his back pocket. He nodded politely when engineers passed. None of them looked at him longer than 3 seconds. 19 hours until the next diagnostic window. That night, he returned at 2 a.m. exactly. Ticket number 7742 appeared in the system under the name M. Ledger, a ghost account he had created years ago. He patched firmware for 17 minutes, rerouting a coolant loop that had been bleeding 3% efficiency since the last upgrade. The change was invisible on any dashboard. Only the telemetry logs would show a sudden, perfect stability that had no business existing. Day 3. Elena paced her corner office on the 23rd floor. The $940 million Defense Department contract for the next-generation hypersonic drone hung by a thread. 3 test flights had already been scrubbed. She tightened security, doubled the night patrols, and told her lead engineer, "Find whoever is touching my engines and fire them before breakfast." Marcus listened from the utility closet 10 feet away, polishing the same stretch of floor for the 3rd time. The dog tag felt heavier in his pocket tonight. Day 4. Another 2 a.m. visit. Another small correction slipped into the production line. A bearing tolerance tightened by 0.004 of an inch. The line workers the next morning scratched their heads at parts that suddenly fit better than they had any right to. No one traced it back to the janitor, who emptied their coffee cups at shift change. Sophie waited up past bedtime that night, clutching a paper napkin with a new drawing. An airplane with a tiny dog tag around its neck. Marcus tucked her in at 10:47 p.m., read her the same story about the quiet mechanic who fixed the stars, and kissed her forehead. The apartment smelled of lavender again. The countdown continued. Day 5. Elena stood in the same hangar at 1:55 a.m., Louboutins replaced by practical boots, Brioni swapped for a black turtleneck. She stared at the turbine that refused to fail no matter how hard her people pushed it. The sticky note incident still bothered her. She ran a gloved finger along the console, found nothing. Marcus watched from the catwalk above, 30 feet up, breathing slow. The dog tag rested against his sternum, cool now from the night air. He waited until she left, then descended and made the next invisible adjustment, this one to the ignition timing curve. The numbers on his battered blueprint, drawing 17C, revision Delta, page 41, glowed under the single work light like they had been waiting 11 years for his return. The rain had stopped outside. Inside the hangar, the only sound was the soft click of stainless steel against cotton as Marcus Hale walked back into the shadows. Day 6. The pattern repeated. Small, procedural, invisible. Each dawn brought Elena one step closer to the edge of the $940 million contract cliff, and Marcus one step closer to the boardroom that had once watched him carry a mop like a man with no other options. But the blueprints in his 3rd floor walk up on 9th, and alders still waited in their cracked leather tube, graphite ink still smelling faintly after all this time. And the question that no one in the company had asked yet kept ticking like a second hand. What exactly was hiding inside those dog-eared blueprints no one had touched in 11 years? Day 7. The fluorescent lights in the executive corridor buzzed at 6:12 a.m. Elena Voss marched past the glass-walled conference room where 6 analysts were already slurping cold coffee. Her Louboutins clicked sharply against the polished concrete, each step echoing the $940 million deadline, now staring at her from every spreadsheet. The turbine data had flatlined again overnight. No explanation, no error codes, just flawless performance that refused to break. She stopped at the janitor station near the east stairwell, eyes narrowing at the fresh pot of coffee already brewed exactly the way the night crew liked it. Strong, black, no cream. Marcus had been here. Again. She snatched a paper napkin from a stack, wiped a smudge from her left heel, and crumpled it without a second thought. Up on the 3rd floor, in the apartment smelling faintly of lavender, Sophie would later unfold that very napkin and add another careful line with her crayons. A tiny airplane now had landing gear, and around its neck, the same dog tag, drawn with the meticulous pressure of a 7-year-old who believed her father could fix anything. Marcus watched the napkin disappear into Elena's fist from the service elevator 2 floors below. The metal dog tag pressed against his chest like a second heartbeat, warm now from the climb. He let the doors close without a sound. Day 8. The first visible crack appeared at 9:47 a.m. during the engineering stand-up. A junior technician named Reyes slid a fresh printout across the laminate table. "Ma'am, the ignition curve on test rig 3 is off-spec by exactly 0.3%, but it's performing 14% better than the theoretical maximum. I can't explain it." Elena's gloved fingers tightened around her Mont Blanc. The same 0.3% adjustment she had seen on the sticky note 4 days earlier. She scanned the room. 22 faces. None of them looked guilty. None of them looked capable. "Run it again," she said, voice low, "and pull the security footage from the hangar between 0100 and 0300. Marcus was 3 levels down, pushing a gray mop across the sub-basement floor when the first guard walked past with a tablet. The dog tag stayed hidden beneath his faded work shirt. He kept his head down, the scent of pine disinfectant sharp in his nostrils. But when the guard turned the corner, Marcus allowed himself one small exhale. The reversal had begun. Not loud, not yet, just enough to make the polished machine tremble. That night, Sophie waited again, past bedtime, napkin in both hands. The airplane now had wings that actually looked like they could fly. Marcus read to her at 10:52 p.m. the same story about the quiet mechanic who fixed the stars, his voice steady even though his pulse still carried the rhythm of the catwalk climb. The lavender candle on the windowsill flickered once when he kissed her forehead. He left the napkin on her nightstand like a promise neither of them fully understood yet. Day 9. The security footage showed nothing useful. A shadow on the catwalk at 2:14 a.m. That was all. Elena played the clip 7 times in her corner office, the city lights of downtown glittering 41 floors below. Her Patek read 11:37 p.m. She poured herself 2 fingers of Macallan, neat, and let the peat smoke curl in her throat. The bourbon tasted like doubt. She did not know that the man who had emptied her wastebasket at 4:50 p.m. that same afternoon was the only person alive who had ever flown the exact prototype engine, now sitting in her test cell. 287 missions. Call sign Ghost 9. The records had been sealed the day he walked away from the program 11 years ago. The day the board had voted to streamline the original design team. The day Marcus Hale had carried a cardboard box past the very conference table where Elena now planned her $940 million victory lap. He had kept one object from that box, a single dog tag on a worn chain. The rest of the blueprints had waited inside the cracked leather tube on the shelf above Sophie's bed, untouched until the night Elena's predecessor had laughed at his resignation letter and called the designs relics. Day 10. The mini-crisis arrived at precisely 3:19 a.m. An alarm screamed through the main hangar. Red strobes painted the turbine housing the color of fresh blood. Elena arrived still in yesterday's turtleneck, hair loose for the first time anyone could remember. The ignition sequencer had locked into a feedback loop. The numbers were climbing toward critical. If the test article overheated now, the entire certification run would be scrubbed. The contract would evaporate by sunrise. Technicians shouted over the klaxon. Someone suggested a full shutdown. Elena's jaw tightened. She could already see the boardroom faces from last year, the ones who had watched her promised results by the end of the quarter. The same faces that had once watched a janitor push a cart past their catered lunch and never once met his eyes. Marcus stood just outside the emergency doors, coveralls zipped to the throat, the dog tag now burning against his skin. He had set the loop himself the night before. A controlled failure. A problem only one man in the building knew how to solve without destroying the hardware. He waited 43 seconds. Then he walked in. "Ma'am," he said, voice calm against the sirens. "I can stop it, but I need 30 seconds alone with the sequencer panel." Elena stared at him like he had spoken in another language. The janitor, the man who refilled the water cooler. His sleeves were rolled once, revealing the faded edge of a tattoo she had never noticed before. 3 small stars inked just above his left wrist. The room fell quiet except for the wailing alarm. "You have 20, she snapped. Marcus moved without hurry. He removed the access panel with 2 precise turns of a hex key from his pocket. His fingers found the exact relay that should not have existed on any current schematic, the one he had installed during the original 2009 prototype build. Drawing 17C, Revision Delta, page 41. He made one small adjustment. The alarm died mid-scream. The turbine spooled down into a perfect idle, humming like a contented beast. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. Elena's boots did not move. Her eyes tracked every motion as Marcus replaced the panel, wiped a single smudge from the console with the cuff of his sleeve, and turned to leave. "Who the hell are you?" she asked. The words came out quieter than she intended. Marcus paused at the hangar door. The dog tag shifted beneath his coveralls, cool again from the night air that drifted in from the open bay. "Still the janitor, ma'am," he said. "Just one who remembers where the old keys fit." He walked out before she could answer. The scent of ozone and jet fuel clung to the back of her throat long after the door sealed behind him. Day 11. The rumor started in the break room at 7:05 a.m. Someone had seen the janitor fix the sequencer in under 20 seconds. Someone else claimed the adjustment matched a modification that had been classified years ago. By lunch, the whispers had reached the 41st floor. Elena stood at the head of the long mahogany table, Brioni jacket perfectly tailored, Mont Blanc tapping once against the glass surface. 12 department heads watched her. She could feel the shift in the air, the way their eyes kept drifting toward the service door at the back of the room. She had spent the last 4 hours reviewing every personnel file with the name Marcus attached. Nothing. Clean. Ordinary. A single father with a 7-year-old daughter in an apartment on 9th and Alder. Yet the turbine was purring at 112% efficiency for the first time since the project began. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled napkin she had taken from the janitor's station the day before. The one she had meant to throw away. On it, in purple crayon, was an airplane with a dog tag around its neck and 3 tiny stars drawn above the left wing. The same 3 stars she had glimpsed on the janitor's wrist at 3:19 a.m. Elena's thumb traced the crayon lines. The paper felt suddenly heavier than it should. That evening, Marcus sat on the edge of Sophie's bed at 10:41 p.m. The lavender candle had burned down to a stub. She handed him the newest napkin. The airplane now had a small figure standing beneath it, holding what looked like a mop. But the dog tag around the plane's neck had been colored silver with careful metallic crayon. "Daddy," she whispered, already half asleep. "Is the quiet mechanic going to fix the whole sky this time?" Marcus folded the napkin once, then twice, and slipped it into the breast pocket of his work shirt. The real dog tag rested against the paper like 2 halves of the same promise. He kissed her forehead, tasted the faint strawberry from her toothpaste, and let the apartment door click shut behind him at 11:03 p.m. Day 12. The board called an emergency review for 8 a.m. sharp. Elena arrived at 7:44, carrying the napkin in a small evidence bag she had taken from the security desk. She told no one why. The leather tube of blueprints still sat untouched on the shelf in Marcus's apartment, but the scent of old graphite had begun to leak into the hallway whenever he opened the door. And the countdown on her desk calendar now read 19 days to the certification flight. Marcus pushed his cart down the east corridor at 7:51 a.m., the wheels squeaking once on the freshly waxed floor. He passed the boardroom door without slowing. Inside, Elena was pinning the crayon airplane to the evidence board beside the security still of the shadow on the catwalk. She did not see him, but for the first time, she felt watched. The dog tag beneath his shirt grew warm again as he turned the corner. The faint metallic click of chain against cotton, the only sound in the empty hall. The same sound that had followed him 11 years ago when he had walked out of this building carrying nothing but a cardboard box and the quiet knowledge that one day the machine they had thrown away would need its father back. Day 13. Another small reversal at 2:07 a.m. This time the crisis wore a different face. A corrupted calibration file that should have wiped 12 hours of test data. Elena found herself while reviewing logs, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. The file had been altered with surgical precision. Every checksum pointed to an inside job. She was minutes away from calling corporate security when the backup partition she had never known existed suddenly reappeared on her screen. The restored data carried a single embedded note in the metadata, time-stamped 11 years earlier. Tell Voss the old man sends his regards. Drawing 17C still holds. Elena stared at the line until the letters blurred. The dog tag and the crayon drawing on her evidence board seemed to glint under the desk lamp, even though it was only wax. She looked up at the ceiling tiles as if she could see through them to the catwalk above the hangar. The janitor was up there right now. She knew it the way she knew the turbine would pass its next stress test without explanation. Marcus knelt in the darkness 30 feet above her office, adjusting a ventilation damper that had nothing to do with airflow. The leather tube waited at home, one more blueprint still sealed inside. Page 42, the one that carried his original signature in the bottom right corner, faded but unmistakable. He let the damper click shut. The sound carried the same finality as the latch on Sophie's bedroom door at 10:47 p.m. every night. The lavender candle would be lit again soon. The napkin would gain new lines. The countdown would keep ticking. And Elena Voss, for the first time in her polished career, felt the slow, procedural weight of a debt she did not yet understand beginning to settle across her shoulders. Day 14. The fluorescent lights in the executive wing hummed at 6:12 a.m. like they always did. But today the sound carried an edge. Elena Voss stood at the head of the long walnut table, Brioni blazer buttoned tight, Patek chronograph catching the weak dawn light. The quarterly board packet lay open in front of her. Page 17 showed projected test dates slipping by 9 days. 9 days that could cost the program $47 million in penalties. Someone inside is feeding bad data to the oversight committee, she said, voice clipped. I want names by close of business. Her gaze swept the room and landed on the empty chair at the far end, the one reserved for facilities oversight. Marcus had never sat in it, not once in the 14 days since she'd stripped him of access. Yet the maintenance logs still updated themselves at 3 a.m. every single night, flawless, untraceable. The board members shifted in their leather seats. One of them, a silver-haired investor named Harlan, cleared his throat. Ms. Voss, perhaps it's time we brought in external auditors. This smells like sabotage. Elena's manicured nails tapped once against the tabletop. The leather tube she had confiscated from Marcus's locker 2 nights earlier rested in her desk drawer like a live round. She had not opened it. Not yet. At 9:47 a.m., the first mini-crisis arrived, wearing the face of a frozen actuator on the primary test rig. The entire hangar fell into silence, except for the low groan of failing hydraulics. Technicians shouted coordinates. Red warning strobes painted the steel beams crimson. Elena watched from the observation deck, jaw set. If the rig seized now, the titanium blade assembly would shear and the insurance underwriters would walk away. $218 million in exposure. She was reaching for the emergency kill switch when the actuator suddenly cycled back to green. Smooth as silk, the groan faded. The strobes died. A single line of diagnostic text scrolled across the main monitor. Pressure bleed corrected per drawing 17C. Old protocols still work. No one in the control room spoke. Elena felt the dog tag on her evidence board, watching her again from across the hangar. The wax crayon lines on Sophie's drawing had started to look less like a child's doodle and more like coordinates. Day 15. Marcus swept the same corridor at 11:03 p.m., the push broom moving in the same metronomic rhythm it had for 11 years. The leather tube was back in his possession now, slipped from Elena's drawer while she took a 4-minute bathroom break. He had left a single paper napkin in its place. Fresh lines inked across it in the same steady hand that had once signed off on every stress tolerance spec the company still used. The new sketch showed the exact failure point on tomorrow's high cycle fatigue test. A small circled note read, check the harmonic damper at node 4, 2:14 a.m. He folded the napkin once, the way he used to fold the bedtime notes for Sophie and slid it under the wiper blade of Elena's matte black Range Rover in the executive lot. The lavender scent from the candle in his apartment still clung faintly to his coveralls. Elena found the napkin at 1:51 a.m. She read it under the parking garage sodium lights, breath fogging in the cold. For 37 seconds, she stood motionless. Then she walked back inside, heels clicking against concrete, and climbed the metal stairs to the test platform herself. At 2:14 a.m., the harmonic damper and Node 4 began to resonate exactly as predicted. Elena, wearing borrowed gloves and a hard hat 2 sizes too big, tightened the overlooked lock nut by 1/4 turn. The vibration died. The test rig held. She stepped back, sweat cooling on her neck, and heard the soft click of a ventilation grate 30 feet above her. Marcus was already gone. Only the faint smell of lemon floor polish lingered. Day 16. The boardroom smelled of expensive coffee and fear. 10 a.m. sharp. Harlan slammed a printed log onto the table. 17 terabytes of archived test data restored overnight. Every checksum perfect. And this note, embedded in the root directory. He read aloud, voice tight. The machine remembers what its children forget. Elena's Patek read 10:03. She said nothing. The dog tag and the crayon drawing on her private evidence board had acquired a new scar. Someone had pressed a real metal tag against the wax, leaving a faint imprint. The tag read, Captain M. R. Hale, 287 missions. She had run the name at 4:07 a.m. Marcus Reginald Hale, retired chief structural engineer, the man who had designed the original airframe before the company went public and decided his salary line item looked too expensive. The man who had walked out carrying a cardboard box and the original blueprints no one else had ever fully understood. She still had not confronted him. Instead, she drove to the small house on Maple Terrace at 7:42 p.m. that same evening. The lavender candle glowed behind the front window. Sophie, 7 years old, opened the door in dinosaur pajamas. She held up a new napkin. Daddy said you might come. He said to give you this one. The fresh drawing showed the upcoming auction floor plan. Red ink circled seat 18C. A single line underneath read, Bring the tube. Day 19, 11 a.m. Elena took the napkin. The paper felt warm, as though it had just come off the kitchen table. She looked past the child and saw Marcus standing in the hallway, arms folded, face half in shadow. Their eyes met for the first time since the day she had called him scrap metal. He gave the smallest nod. No triumph, just recognition. She drove away at 8:19 p.m. with the leather tube now resting on the passenger seat like a sleeping snake. The dog tag imprint on the crayon drawing seemed to pulse in her mind every time she blinked. Day 17. Another corrupted file. This one hit the bidding portal at 3:33 a.m. The entire auction catalog for the legacy tooling suddenly listed reserve prices at 0. Bidders from 3 continents began circling like sharks. Elena woke to the ping of her phone and sat bolt upright in her downtown loft. Silk sheets twisted around her legs. She killed the auction feed in 6 keystrokes, but the damage was done. 37 new inquiries already sat in her inbox. She drove to the hangar at 4:51 a.m. The night crew had been sent home. Only the emergency lights burned. Marcus was on his knees inside the primary nacelle, sleeves rolled up, replacing a corroded relay that had nothing to do with the bidding system. The leather tube lay open beside him. Page 42 rested on his thigh, original signature catching the work lamp's glare. Elena stopped 10 feet away. The echo of her Italian heels died against the curved titanium walls. You're the reason this bird still flies, she said. The words tasted like iron. Marcus didn't look up. I'm the reason it flew in the first place, Ms. Voss. You just forgot who built the nest. He clicked the relay into place. The nacelle test lights flickered once, then burned steady green. He stood, wiped his hands on a blue shop rag. and held out the folded napkin from the night before. Fresh ink, new lines. A countdown clock now filled the center. 19 hours to the auction. Elena took it. Their fingers did not touch. The lavender scent drifted between them like a memory neither wanted to name. Day 18. The crisis wore the face of a federal investigator at 9 a.m. Special Agent Reyes arrived with 2 deputies and a warrant for suspicious data manipulation. The boardroom smelled of panic and Harlan cedar aftershave. Elena stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the rain streak the glass. She could feel the weight of the leather tube inside her locked drawer like a second heartbeat. Reyes laid out printed screenshots. Every restored file carried the same embedded signature, a tiny vector drawing of a dog tag. We traced the access logs, he said. All of them route through a custodial account. Janitor level clearance. That's you, isn't it, Mr. Hale? Marcus stood in the corner wearing the same gray coveralls, broom propped beside him. He looked smaller than ever. Yet when he spoke, his voice carried the same quiet finality as the latch on Sophie's bedroom door. Those files are mine before any of you were born. I simply reminded them who their father was. Elena felt the slow procedural debt settle another inch across her shoulders. She called this man useless. She had told him to take his box and go. Now the entire future of the company balanced on pages only he had ever fully understood. The investigator demanded a private interview. Marcus followed him without protest. Elena stayed behind, alone with the evidence board. She lifted the crayon drawing from its pin. The wax dog tag had begun to peel at one edge. Beneath it, inked so faintly only she would notice, was a new line in Marcus's hand. Seat 18C. Bring the original signature. The machine still loves its children. Day 19. 11 hours to the auction. The hangar thrummed with pre-bid energy. Caterers laid out silver trays. Reporters set up cameras along the mezzanine. Elena's Brioni suit felt suddenly too tight. She had not slept. The leather tube rested inside a carbon fiber briefcase handcuffed to her wrist. Page 42 waited inside like a verdict. At 10:47 a.m., she climbed the catwalk alone. The same catwalk where Marcus had knelt in darkness for 14 straight nights. The damper he had adjusted still carried his fingerprints. She ran her thumb across the metal and felt the faint engraving he had left there with a pocket knife. Sophie's future. R. Hale. Below her, the auction floor filled with the same people who had watched her fire him on day 1. Harlan adjusted his tie. The federal investigator took a seat in row 9. And in seat 18C, exactly where the napkin had promised, sat a small figure in dinosaur pajamas clutching a lavender-scented napkin covered in fresh blue lines. Elena's pulse hammered against her throat. The dog tag in her pocket felt heavier than the briefcase. She started down the stairs, each step measured, each breath counted. The slow collection of the debt had reached its final procedural turn, but the real reversal was still 37 minutes away. The hangar lights buzzed overhead like a swarm of metal insects. Elena gripped the briefcase tighter. 11 hours had become 10 hours, 23 minutes. She kept her eyes on the small figure in seat 18C. Dinosaur pajamas. Lavender napkin clutched like a flag of surrender. The same napkin Marcus had left on her desk the morning she told him to take his box and go. She reached the main floor. The scent of fresh coffee and floor wax hit her first, then the low murmur of the crowd. Harlan spotted her and gave that polished smirk he reserved for press photos. His Italian loafers clicked once as he shifted weight. The federal investigator in row 9 never looked up from his tablet. Elena's throat felt dry as old paper. Marcus stood off to the side near a service door. No suit, just the same faded mechanic's jacket he had worn on day 1. He nodded once. Nothing more. The crayon dog tag in her pocket burned against her hip. She had carried it for 19 days now. Each time she touched it, the wax peeled a fraction more. Each time another faint line appeared underneath. Day 19. 10 hours, 8 minutes. The first mini-crisis arrived without warning. A technician sprinted across the hangar floor, waving a clipboard. "Ms. Voss, we have a problem with the schematics for Lot 42. The dampers don't match the digital prints. The whole hydraulic array could seize during demonstration." His voice cracked on the last word. Heads turned. Reporters lifted cameras. Harlan's smirk froze mid-step. Elena felt the debt settle another inch. She had fired the only man who understood those dampers. Now the entire auction rested on hardware that refused to speak to itself. She looked toward Marcus. He had not moved. The technician followed her gaze and paled. "Sir, Mr. Hale, the original engineer is in the room, isn't he?" Marcus said nothing. He simply walked forward, boots quiet on the polished concrete. The technician handed him the clipboard. Marcus scanned it once, then lifted his eyes to Elena. For the first time in 19 days, those eyes carried something sharper than patience. "Seat 18C still empty?" he asked. She shook her head. "Occupied," exactly as the note said. He gave the smallest smile. Then he turned and disappeared through the service door. The technician stared after him. Elena's pulse hammered harder. The briefcase on her wrist suddenly felt like an anchor. She followed. Inside the narrow corridor, the air smelled of oil and old concrete. Marcus was already on his knees beside an access panel. His fingers moved with the memory of 14 straight nights on the catwalk above. He unscrewed a cover plate. Beneath it lay a second set of schematics rolled tight and bound with twine. He handed them over without ceremony. "Page 42 was never the final page," he said simply. "It was the map. The real schematics were always in the machine's own memory, the one I taught how to remember its children." Elena unrolled the papers. Exact match. Every stamped approval. Every faded coffee ring stain from nights he had worked alone after Sophie's mother had passed. The technician exhaled like a man pulled from deep water. The reversal landed private and precise. The technician radioed the control room. Within 4 minutes, the dampers hummed back into alignment. The demonstration rig cycled once, smooth as silk. No one outside the corridor had seen it happen. But Elena had. She watched Marcus wipe grease from his hands on a rag that smelled of the same lavender soap Sophie used at bedtime. He folded the rag once, twice, then tucked it into his jacket pocket. The dog tag in her own pocket peeled another millimeter. Beneath the wax, a new line had appeared in the same faint ink. 19 hours was never the deadline. The machine keeps its own time. Day 19, 9 hours, 41 minutes. They returned to the hangar floor separately. Elena's Brioni suit now carried a faint smear of gearbox oil on the left cuff. She did not wipe it away. The crowd had grown. 2 more federal agents had joined the investigator in row 9. Harlan was on his phone, voice low and urgent. Something about liquidity and backup bids. Elena climbed the catwalk again. The metal still carried the faint scratches from Marcus's pocket knife. Sophie's future, M.R. Hale. She ran her thumb across them the way a blind woman reads Braille. Below, the small figure in dinosaur pajamas had not moved. The lavender napkin now lay open on the child's lap. Fresh blue lines covered it. Elena could not read them from this height, but she knew the handwriting. Another hour bled away in procedural silence. Caterers refreshed the silver trays. Reporters checked batteries. The auctioneer tested the microphone at 11:19 a.m. sharp. Each tick of the clock felt like another payment on the debt Elena owed. She had told a decorated test pilot, original systems architect of the entire hypersonic fleet, to take his box and go. The words still tasted like rust in her mouth. Day 19, 8 hours, 57 minutes to the auction. The second mini-crisis arrived inside a locked metal case. A courier in a dark suit arrived at the main gate carrying a brushed aluminum briefcase stamped with federal seals. He demanded Elena by name. When she met him in the corridor, he opened the case. Inside lay the original signed directive from 11 years earlier. the one that proved Marcus had never been fired from the core project, only placed on extended detached duty after his wife's funeral. The signature on page 1 was hers, trembling, dated the same week Sophie had drawn the first crayon dog tag. The courier's voice stayed flat. The department requires verbal confirmation before we release the full archive. Otherwise, the entire fleet certification lapses at midnight tonight. No certification, no oxygen. The machine goes dark. Elena's knees almost buckled. The leather tube inside her own briefcase suddenly felt counterfeit. She had spent 19 days chasing pages she thought she owned. Now the real deed sat in federal hands, and the only man who could verify it stood 20 feet away in a mechanic's jacket. She found Marcus beside the demonstration rig. He was showing the small figure in dinosaur pajamas how the damper piston breathed. The child's laugh carried across the hangar like distant bells. The lavender napkin lay folded between them on a tool chest. Marcus looked up as she approached. The courier waited 3 steps behind her. The dog tag in her pocket peeled again. This time the wax flaked completely off one corner. The new line beneath reads simply, "Bring the original signature. The machine still loves its children." Elena spoke first. "They need your confirmation. The one from seat 18C. The one you kept when I told you to leave." For the first time, Marcus's face showed strain. Not anger, just the long wait of 19 days spent kneeling in darkness so his daughter's future would not collapse with the company. He reached into his jacket and produced the folded lavender napkin, the same one the child now carried, the same one he had left on her desk the morning of the firing. He opened it slowly. Blue crayon lines formed a perfect replica of the original signature. Every loop, every hesitation, every faint tremor from that terrible week after the funeral. The courier scanned it with a handheld reader. A green light blinked once. "Confirmed," the courier said. "Archive releases in 90 minutes. Auction may proceed." The small reversal landed like a quiet click inside a lock. No one on the floor below had heard it, but Elena felt the debt slide another precise inch. She had publicly dismissed a man whose quiet competence had kept the entire hypersonic program alive through budget cuts, through scandals, through the private grief no one else had been allowed to see. Marcus closed the napkin and handed it to the child in dinosaur pajamas. Sophie pressed it to her cheek and breathed in the lavender scent, the same scent that had filled the house the night her mother died. The same scent Marcus had carried with him for every one of the 287 missions he flew afterward in silence. Day 19, 7 hours, 44 minutes. Elena returned to the mezzanine alone. The Brioni suit now carried both gearbox oil and the faint wax residue from the dog tag. She no longer cared who noticed. Harlan caught her eye from across the room. His face had lost some of its earlier confidence. The Patek on his wrist caught the lights as he checked the time again. He looked smaller. The federal investigator in row 9 finally looked up. Their eyes met. He gave the slightest nod. Recognition, not of her, of the man whose name had begun to surface in every corrected schematic, every restored damper, every line of code the machine refused to run for anyone else. Elena's phone vibrated inside her jacket. A single text from an unknown number. "Tell Sophie the dog tag is almost ready to come home." She looked down towards seat 18C. The child waved once. Small hand. Dinosaur sleeves. The lavender napkin now bore one final blue line that Elena could read even from the mezzanine. The countdown had shifted. Elena's breath caught. The slow procedural collection had just added another turn. The hangar lights seemed brighter, the crowd louder, and somewhere beneath the polished floor the machine itself seemed to settle, as if it too had been waiting 19 days for its father to finish what he started. She slipped the peeled crayon dog tag from her pocket and pinned it to the inside of her lapel where only she could see it. The wax was almost gone now. Only faint ink remained, but the message had grown longer. Seat 18C. Bring the original signature. The machine still loves its children. And beneath that, in letters so small, she had to tilt the tag toward the light. The final signature is still yours to give back. Elena closed her fist around the tag. The debt felt heavier than the carbon fiber briefcase ever had. She started down the stairs once more. Each step measured. Each breath counted. The reversal was still hours away. But the procedural turns were coming faster now. And every one of them carried the faint scent of lavender and old oil and a father who had never stopped working in the dark. The auction floor waited below. The same people. The same catwalk scars. The same small figure in dinosaur pajamas, holding a napkin that had somehow become the only document that still mattered. Elena kept walking. The dog tag pressed against her heart like a second pulse. 19 days had taught her one thing above all. The machine had never forgotten its children, and neither had its father. In the end, the story wasn't about revenge. It was about the slow arithmetic of dignity. About how every midnight line of code, every unread voice message, every dismissed father still carries weight. The world keeps score in ways polished shoes and corner offices cannot see. And sometimes the quietest debts are the ones that rewrite the ledger in front of everyone who once refused to read it. The lavender napkin rests now in a small glass case beside the prototype. A child drawing of a man coming home. A scent that still lingers if you stand close enough on certain nights. A reminder that no one is ever truly scrapped. Not if someone still remembers the way home.